All right, I think we're ready to get started. Just gonna share my screen here. Can you all see?
Yeah, we can see Elizabeth.
Okay.
Good.
Oops. Alrighty, so first off, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I know we had to cancel the last two meetups, and I apologize for that. It's been difficult getting speakers, especially around the holidays, but regardless, we're here now, and we have a very exciting meetup for you tonight. We have TechGuard's very own red team, our technical team here to present for you, and they're gonna speak a little bit on their day-to-day experience working at TechGuard and the things that they deal with in their jobs. So thank you again, and I'm gonna let them take it away.
Hello, everyone. This is Nick Just. I am over our commercial division at TechGuard, and we'll go through and do some introductions, probably as we go through the presentation and have discussion tonight. So, but yes, to echo what Elizabeth was saying, glad everybody was able to join, and please feel free at any point to stop us and start discussion topics and whatnot. I'll go ahead and kick things off here. So yes, Nick Just, TechGuard Security over the commercial division. Just some background on who TechGuard is. We started out as, we're a woman-owned small business. We got our start essentially in the government space, and actually we started out as a research and development company. And in order to help, grow the business and whatnot, we started offering professional services just through government contracts and whatnot. So, and you'll see as we kind of go through this where most of our time in the industry is spent is really on the government side. However, you'll notice on this slide here that in 2017, we started out taking everything that we learned in the first 17 years of working with, government, different government agencies, DoD contracts, and the intelligence community, and saw a huge need for that in the commercial sector. So really anything that doesn't require, a top secret clearance and whatnot. So over the last 5 years, in standing up and, starting up the commercial division, we've had some pretty decent success. We've, gained a couple different clients here and there, and some larger clients as well. But the majority of our clients are the small to medium-sized businesses. While we do have, enterprise-sized clients from time to time, that's really where our focus is at. On the commercial side, just talking through, some of the things that we offer, and I'll hold that off. I know we have a slide later on for that, but been in business for quite a while, obviously since the year 2000, and we're still chugging along. Elizabeth, you want to move to the next slide here? So when we look at our business as a whole, it's really two divisions that fall underneath TechGuard. It's the government division, which makes up, I would say, close to 75, maybe 80% of all of our employees and revenue and whatnot. And you can see some of the clients we work with there. We do quite a few more things on the government side. We're not just solely focused on the red team or offensive side of the business. They do, offer different services based on the contract and whatnot. However, they're all in the cybersecurity space. So that side of the business has a huge and long tenure with a lot of our clients, the cyber commands, BAE, BAH, all of them. So you'll be able to see, where we get a lot of our offering in supporting a lot of our government clients. And we're able to take that and bring that to the commercial sector. So let's talk a little bit about our commercial or corporate side of the business. That's everybody you're going to talk to today is going to be, our different pen testers, our process folks who work with, all of our clients and whatnot. And so I'm just going to set the stage for them quick to take over the presentation. But again, our corporate or commercial, side of the business has been around for about 5 years. And while we continue to grow and continue to see a big need for a lot of our services that we offer, it's an ever changing game, right? So we've found our core services in the corporate or commercial sector to really be the proactive preventative services, your pen testing, your vulnerability scanning audits, and you can see some more on here. But in each and every one of those, we want to kind of dive into a bit of, what our take on each one is, how we go about doing it, why it's important. And we have on the call or on the presentation today, you'll hear from pretty much everybody just where they specialize and kind of how they got there. So I'll hand it back over to Elizabeth to kind of introduce them, and or they can introduce themselves, and we'll just start the discussion with some of the experts here.
So hello, everyone. My name is Adam Voss here. I'm going to share my screen or my video for a second, just so you can put a name to the face. I work here at TechGuard as a security analyst and a sales engineer. My road to kind of how I got here was I went to school in the Missouri area at Maryville University. And got my bachelor's in cybersecurity there, and then through some internships, worked at Centene for a little bit, found my way onto the red team here, where I have a number of different responsibilities, but some of my day-to-day functions include me handling one of our large partners with their vulnerability scans, doing other sales engineers tasks like qualifying our clients, scoping them out, finding where their needs meet our services, and also carrying out penetration tests, which is what we're going to talk to you about here. So TechGuard's core services on the red side, on our commercial side, as Nick was laying out, is our penetration testing. One thing we really wanted to go over tonight was, why we find value pen testing in today's climate, given everything that's going on, how we go about it, and then, some of the other important processes that are sometimes maybe forgotten or often overlooked in the process. Because a lot of the times, especially when we're engaging with clients, everybody gets eager to do the testing, but they also kind of forget about the paperwork that kind of goes with it too. So we'll just kind of start at the top. So at TechGuard, we use the Nist 800-115 methodology. Also, if at any point in time anybody has a question, please feel free to interject. We'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have about any slides, anything that comes up. So don't think that this is one of those like we have to wait till the end. I'm looking at the chat. Our Elizabeth, who's our chat moderator as well too, and doing the slide presentation, she's paying attention as well. So please feel free at any point in time to ask questions, because that's what we're here for tonight. So with that being said, penetration testing is probably one of our largest services that we offer. It's definitely one of the core services. We use the Nist 800-115 methodology, which really breaks penetration testing up into 4 different phases. Those phases being the planning phase, discovery, attack, and reporting, which I'm just going to come out and be open with everybody, probably is the most important and my least favorite. In school, when they tell you get past your like last language class, they'll be like, I remember just always hearing, hey, congratulations, this will be the last time you ever write a paper. Well, boy, were they wrong when they had cyber majors in the room, because that is probably one of the more time-consuming things that we do. We'll touch on that here in a second, but I just always like to highlight, a lot of people, when you think about red teaming, they're like, oh, it's, that's a really like attractive job that you have. It's fun. It's different for sure. But I think one thing that a lot of people don't really harp on is the importance of that reporting part, which we will definitely get into. So the way we start our planning out is we do some sort of a scoping call. This will be with either a sales team member and myself, or maybe just a sales member if they feel comfortable. Just kind of depends on the client themselves, their needs, things like that. We go through a qualification questionnaire with them, kind of asking them, like, hey, what are you really in need of today? What is your guys' cyber roadmap looking like? Where do you guys feel like you have some deficiencies? Many things like that, to kind of make sure that, doing a penetration test is the most important thing for them, because we do offer other services, which you will hear about today too. And there are also other things that you can do than a penetration test that can be equally as valuable. Once we've qualified them, got them signed, we then take them over to an ROE process. The rules of engagement is definitely the most important paperwork that we go through in terms of the planning side of this as well. Often, I don't know if anybody ever listens to any podcast, but you can hear about, people engaging on penetration tests in areas that they shouldn't. So what we do is we make sure that we hop on with either our project manager, Shannon, or somebody else, to make sure that, we understand that the penetration test is what they want, whether it be network, web app, cloud, anything like that. And then we make sure that we have the correct scope of assets too, because you never want to test an environment or maybe a critical infrastructure that you're unaware of, or that the client's unaware of, because bringing down business or inhibiting business is definitely not a goal of ours, right? Like, this is supposed to be a learning experience for everybody. We're here to uncover any deficiencies if they exist. And if so, articulate them back to them in a way that they can remediate those findings as well. The name of the podcast in the chat, any podcast name you listen to. Yes. Gary, once I'm done with this presentation, I'll share in the chat all of like the podcast or any of the like learning or continued like learning speakers that I listen to. Because it's definitely a really important part of this. We often find ourselves, in our downtime learning as much as we can. Cyber is definitely one of those you never get to take a break professions, as I'm sure everybody in this chat knows. So back to the process that we use. Once we get through the planning, once we make sure that we have an accurate ROE, we then dive into our discovery. Discovery is trying to create the largest attack surface possible, right? This is using a mixture of different tactics, most of them being like active discovery and passive discovery. Depending on if the client would like us to do attacking during the day or nighttime, being the activity that we can have against their network, you have to work around your parameters. And if you're trying to be more stealthy, definitely as you uncover things, make sure that you are targeting the correct asset group and doing it at the right time. And if you're going to have to be loud and noisy about it, that you're picking your opportunities when you can. So an active, we're going to be trying to discover maybe some ports, maybe figure out what's up, what isn't, use tools like Shodan to see if there are any scanned websites that are up or ports that are known on the internet. And from there, really try to dial in what we could perceive to be vulnerable areas on the network. This can also include login pages, web apps, if they've been deemed part of the engagement or not. And from there, we try to create a very extensive and thorough list detailing all of the ports that are open, services, logins, etc. that are associated with either each IP or URL so that we can create the biggest. Oh, as everybody, sorry, I'm getting your internet connection is unstable. Can everybody hear me okay still?
Yep.
Okay. So after we've created that attack surface, right, using many different techniques and tactics, using both active and passive discovery, we'll then take a phase where we like to, take all of our findings. We don't do these as just one-off engagements, meaning like with the team, we have 6 members, right? Everybody on the team specializes in a different area. So we try to take everything that each one of us has discovered, or maybe found a discovery that would be good for another team member, and then give it to them so that they can execute using their tactics that they have to give us a better chance of creating some type of persistence, or creating listeners, or creating some type of foothold that we can get in the network that'll really help us escalate. We've kind of done both ways before. We've tried the like one-man band, right? Guy who tries to sing, play the drums and guitar all on himself, but it's often very hard for you to keep straight a large engagement like this. So the fact that we have so many skilled team members in so many different areas, we really like to we really like to feed off of each other with the knowledge that we have, so that we can create and efficiently use our time, because time is always of the essence, especially with these engagements. You're talking, depending on what the schedule looks like, getting a large engagement of maybe like 100 IPs or 250 IPs done in about a week to 2 weeks of time. So we really have to be efficient with what we're doing, and we really have to be precise, especially if threat detection or things like that are in play too. We really want to make sure that when we're either going to expose ourselves or we're going to try to attack, we're doing so in the most effective manner possible. So once we get to our attack phase, we use a number of different techniques, some of them being commercial grade pen testing tools, and some of them being manual. A lot of what goes in here, including if you were to maybe try a custom exploit, is really going to depend on your discovery, right? I would probably say that, in my opinion, I think one of the most important areas that you try to be your most thorough is in discovery. Once we get into the attack phase, we'll notify our clients, talk to them about what we're going to do, make sure that they're okay, as long as that's the parameter of the engagement, right? And then from there, we do reporting. Like I said, this is often something I think that gets really overlooked in the field, right? The discovery and the attack part is really, really fun for us. Hold on. Well, what are the things you're looking for in discovery? Oh, that's a good question. So in discovery, a lot of what we're looking for are insecure ports. If we can discover insecure ports, we're also going to look for services that are maybe associated with them. Or if it's like Telnet, we're going to, try to execute maybe some payloads that we know that work on them. We're also going to be looking for like web pages that are up that might have sensitive data that they hold, login pages that you don't know about. We'll take like your top level domain and run subdomain searches on them to see if any login portals that you didn't know exist, which has always been fun. We've had clients before that thought that they had a private login to their email server externally that wasn't password protected and was used for just like their email addresses, that we discover through things like that. So we really try to go through all of the checks that we can, that TechGuards come up with, to uncover as much as we can in the scope of work that we're getting. Sometimes we get 5 IPs and they're just like, they being the customer are just like, hey, we only want these 5 IPs. They're isolated. They're probably managed by like Charter or something like that. It makes it really tough on the scope, but with the bigger ones, we try to uncover as much as we can. So like I said, those are going to be like your insecure ports. Those are going to be login pages. Those are going to be insecure services that are associated with the ports on there. Maybe it's like versions of IIS that are out of date, those kind of things. So those are what we really try to uncover in our discovery phase.
When you think about like the endpoint security strategies that a lot of organizations, lean towards, like effective patch management, endpoint security, network security, zero trust and microsegmentation and all that stuff. What do you think kind of causes you the most problem in that discovery stage? And if it's all of the above, that's fine.
It can be, I would probably say that the most challenging thing in discovery is the limitations of it. So, and a good example of that is like when I talk about, say we get a client and they only want to give us 5 IPs, or they only want to give us like their DMZ. It really, a lot of the times clients are making us focus on areas that they know are extremely secure, to test out, to make sure that, like say they know they're doing good patch management there, right? Or say that they know that they have the proper defense measures set up, that we're getting directed in that area. So, they're not letting us do their entire external network or everything that is encompassing of their business. They just only push us to one area. I would probably say that is the most challenging thing, because sometimes you're trying to really make something out of nothing, right? Maybe with those zero trust networks or some of the other examples, there might be other low-hanging fruit that exist that are in areas that aren't a part of that. Because, right, all you want is you want to find a weakness and you want to be able to exploit it and see where it goes. Now, maybe sometimes if you gain access, it's kind of a dead end area, but we want to start by trying to find like what we would consider low-hanging fruit, like, those insecure portal logins. Maybe it's an area of your network that doesn't have MFA enabled. Maybe it's an area of your network that's allowing legacy systems to authenticate to that service. And by doing so, you could bypass like multi-factor through those measures. It just kind of depends. So it's not really one particular network structure. It's more of what they allow us to look at versus what they don't. Because a lot of the times, like I was saying before, these clients are somewhat, they're somewhat open and they're somewhat hesitant, or they're just really small. That, that could be another thing. So, and this is when we're qualifying them and we'll come in and talk, like maybe a pen test isn't the best thing for them because they have like 2 endpoints and they know what the endpoints are, but maybe internally they haven't written any policy and procedures for their network, or maybe they've never looked at their user groups before, or maybe internally they're using a bunch of insecure protocols or have ports open, things like that. So it will depend when we're scoping them out and talking to them where we kind of, want to point the gun, if you would. Or us, I guess would probably be a better. So once we kind of get this all though, and one area I really want to talk about tonight is the reporting. So none of this, in my opinion, matters if you don't have an effective report. I don't know if anybody in this chat has ever been a part of a pen test before. You guys were really excited about it. Thought this was going to be a good learning experience for you and your team. You get a report back and it is just an automated report that just has like a couple graphs, maybe some host information, maybe some services that are up, but no real actionable items, right? So we really, really emphasize and take our time on our reporting, because this is where the value from the experience comes from, right? Say I discover that insecure ports are open, or say we discover that there are firewall rules in place, but the firewall rules aren't doing what you expect them to do, right? Like one of them a good example could be like, we believe we have good firewall rules, but when we're scanning your network, you guys are still allowing all like Nmap traffic to scan for services, hosts, high level, there's no traffic. So how do we take that information from our findings and put it into an actionable item for you? So we do it in a bunch of different ways, but we have a review of high and critical asset findings for you at like the top of our report. It's very clear and defined say we discovered SMB, say SMB was discovered with a service on it that had a shell that was executable, you don't have to scroll through pages and pages. We have a real pretty executive summary that gets straight to the point. It lays out to you what your most critical findings are, makes it in a way that anyone from your CEO all the way down to maybe like a entry-level worker could read it and understand it. And then we pair those high-level executive findings that detail each phase too. So we will show you where in discovery we found the first part of the executable, then in the attack how it was done, and like I said, there's a real high level on executive, and then your remediations. Then we break it down into more technical throughout our appendices too. So going through there, the technical team members, maybe you guys want to know what tools we use, or maybe you want to see how the technique played out, or maybe you want to see how we chained a couple things together, like how maybe we took a third-party breach and we got a user list, and we took a user list and passed it through, a password word list, and we're able to create, good user with good password and got in. We walk you through those steps and show kind of how these different phases lead to these chained attacks through the attack surface that we're really creating that are given to us. We also offer retest and letters of attestation. Those are things that have been coming up a lot too, that are important as well. A lot of companies now are taking the stance that they want to make sure that if we do this testing, we give to them these letters of attestation that show, at this point in time, are we confident in our findings and we didn't miss anything or such. So I'll leave the floor open here really quick. One part of this penetration testing methodology that we use, we also include vulnerability assessment. So the next part of this is going to be with Matt, who is going to kind of explain to you all our vulnerability assessment program, the different areas that we use it, some of the common findings, things like that. So does anybody have any questions about this at the moment? And Nick, did I answer your question correctly, by the way, too?
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah. All right. Matt, I will kick it over to you.
Hey everybody, my name is Matt Reck. I am also one of the cybersecurity analysts here at TechGuard. I work with Adam on many of the pen tests, vulnerability assessments that we're going over with here, and then as well as some of the web apps. And then I help with some of the auditing with Dean and Shannon, who will be talking a little later about all that. But one of my main responsibilities with vulnerability assessments is I do a lot of the reoccurring vulnerability assessments. So helping with a vulnerability management program with a lot of our small business partners that we have, or clients that we have. As you can see in the top photo there, that is Qualis's little effective vulnerability management program that they have there. It's a cyclical process. It never ends. That's the beauty of vulnerability management. There's always something new out there that's showing up every week, whether it's a known vulnerability that's just popping up because something on your systems has now needed it, or there's a 0-day patch out there or 0-day vulnerability out there that now needs a patch. As you can see, there's the asset inventory, which is kind of phase one, is making sure you know everything on your network is there, knowing what's there and what it is, and having that down in some sort of list format or in some sort of dashboard, and understanding what your network landscape looks like. And then you have the vulnerability and configuration assessment, which essentially is the scan. And then you follow into the threat, risk, and prioritization area, and then into the patch management. What we mainly do for our clients is we do the right side. So we do the vulnerability and config assessment and the threat, risk, and prioritization. And then the client always handles the asset inventory and the patch management. Like Adam says, ROE here is the biggest thing for us. If we're not scanning the right thing for the client, they're not getting the best results out of it, and we're not doing what we can do to help them be as secure as possible, which is where the asset inventory on a client side is very, very important. And what we do with those assessments is we have, just basic network vulnerability assessments, cloud vulnerability assessments, and then web app vulnerability assessments as well. We use Qualys as our main scanning tool. We have a lot of confidence in that tool. It uses the CVSS framework on a scale of CVE rank from 0 to 10 to make its ranking from low to urgent on a scale of 1 to 5. It uses web app OWASP top 10 for this web app location. And then it just weighs things from likelihood versus impact on business, and then also using it on an external or internal scope. What we do with these results when we do these assessments is we deliver them from a sense of high level and being able to deliver them to a executive board and making it easy for them to notice how many vulnerabilities are there, what's their risk looking like, and kind of just a high level, because they don't care about all the details. And we get into the detailed results that we send to the engineers that help fix them, where our Qualys reports will help tell them what's the threat on the business, what's the impact, has it been exploited in the wild, and is there an actual exploit out there? And it helps them prioritize their remediation, because if there's an exploit out there, that means it's a higher risk than something that doesn't, and it helps them prioritize for the next remediation cycle. And we also help with that. Sometimes we're working with clients who don't know how to prioritize the results in a way that benefits them the most. A lot of times it's maybe going down from the vulnerability severity 5, which is an urgent, down to the 1, or it's noticing that a lot of these Sev 5s are end of life software, which we see a lot of, and a lot of our clients know that these are on there, and they're in the process of getting rid of these end of life softwares or computers or any servers that might be nearing end of life. And it's just being able to help them accept the risk for this time, and it reoccurs on these, or shows up on these reoccurring vulnerability assessments. And going forward, we can help them just move those down the line and help them with their risk acceptance in their companies. And like Adam said, we use these in our penetration tests. Oftentimes, they can show us vulnerabilities that we can exploit in penetration tests, especially if they have those exploits. And it helps us in that sense too. And what our Qualys reports also do, and what we like, is that they also help with patch management. They list the patch right there on the report that a customer or client can just click on the link or copy and paste it into whatever they need and to help them with their patch management. A lot of our, I would say our highest findings that we find a lot in reports come from the end of life software, a lot of deprecated cryptographic settings, I see a lot of RC4 ciphers that have to be disabled and things like that. And a lot of SSL certificates, since those are so easily to kind of fall to the back of the mind of whatever, of what they are and how often they have to be re-updated and reassigned. Those end up being a lot of the vulnerabilities out there. And while some of these are a lot easier to resolve than others, it helps customers just see what their landscape looks like from the inside and external, and help them understand. And the fun part with this is externally always looks a lot better than internally, we like to say, just because you want to be protected from the outside. Inside, you can work a little bit more on keeping that look better when remediating. If you have a little more issue on the inside, it's better than a lot more issue on the outside. But yeah. But yeah, so from a vulnerability standpoint, those are about what we do and how we handle vulnerability assessments with TechGuard and our clients. I don't know, I was gonna say, does anybody have any questions or anything that they would about this kind of step in what we do?
This is Shane, and I would just like to kind of call out that this is our critical tool in our discovery process of our pen testing. So every pen test report also has a full vulnerability analysis report as part of that report package as well.
I guess it's my turn. I'm gonna share my camera real quick. Hello, everybody. My name is Nolan. I practice the dark arts of web app penetration testing. I've been tasked with kind of standing up a lot of our services in this domain. And a little bit of background about me. I went to college at Fontbonne University, and that was more of a development school than a cybersecurity school. So I learned like 10 different languages. Between like starting college and where I'm at now, I've developed several web applications on my own using pretty much all the various backend frameworks. So it was a very natural transition for me to get into web application security. I'm very passionate about it, and it is where my interest is. Some of the assessments we do, so our first one is a web application scan. We have several tools, Qualys being one of them. There's a few open source tools we use too. Some good ones it's called Zap. That's actually OWASP's open source tool. And like Nitgo, which is a scanner that anybody can use, so you can download from GitHub. And that you can scan server configurations using Nitgo. So yeah, that's our scanning service for web applications. We also have a pen test, which is a much more manual process than the scan. So you're actually gonna get the tester going in there trying to break some things. With the common findings, we discover these findings through the pen test and through the scanning. It's really just the OWASP top 10. Those are the things that pop up the most. So from what I've seen personally, outdated libraries, front-end libraries tend to be very popular. So I'm talking about like JavaScript libraries. WordPress is a big issue. All you people running WordPress sites, keep those libraries updated. Also, injection attacks, although they're coming less and less frequent as developers are becoming more savvy with remediating those issues. And I say those two are the definitely biggest vulnerabilities I see is out-of-date libraries and injection-based attacks. Some of the ways we we assess risk or score it is a CVSS framework. We also use the OWASP top 10. If we find a vulnerability that's in the OWASP top 10, those are the type of vulnerabilities hackers are looking for. So you should probably remediate those first. And for web apps, like it's really important to take the context of the vulnerability into account. So you might have a vulnerability on a CVSS score be rated as a 9 because it's easily exploitable and it can do some damage, but it really depends. Like I know a lot of web applications out there, don't really hosting sensitive data, or maybe they're just in a portion of the web app where they can't be leveraged to really cause a lot of damage. So that's something we do, because you'll get a report and it'll have all these vulnerabilities, and for a web app, some of them just don't make sense. So we take our time at TechGuard to really digest all the vulnerability data, all the testing data, and to give our own scoring on the vulnerabilities that fit the context of the web application. Another point, so what's the difference between application and penetration testing, and why you need both of them for a web app? That's because scanners only find about 80% of the vulnerabilities. So they're gonna find a lot of your injection-based vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, whether it be like cookies or session tokens, and they'll find outdated libraries. But there's a lot of vulnerabilities that come into place that will not be picked up by scanners, because at the end of the day, web apps are custom developed, and you might be able to just manipulate the flow of the application to cause an adverse outcome. So we call that a logic-based attack, and those tend to be some of the more damaging ones. So web app pen testing, having a manual overview of the application is really important. And the testing standard we use is the OWASP Web Security Testing Guide. It's pretty broad. There's like over, I think, 70 different like testing objectives in that standard. So a full-fledged web app pen test can take a long time. So it's really important to scope it, kind of ask the customer, like, hey, like how in depth you want me to go? Because you can point me at a web app and I can go at it for like 2 months. I'll just keep banging my head on the desk until I find something. In which you usually always at that point will find something. So it's good practice to share up all the low hanging fruit, because this is exposed on the internet, so any hacker can go visit it. And you really want to make sure your website is better than the next guy's website. And most useful tool for me is Burp Suite. A lot of you are probably familiar with Burp Suite, but essentially it's a proxy tool. So you download it and it sits between your browser and the web server you're connecting to, and you actually see the raw requests that your browser is making to the web server, and we can manipulate that. And that version of the tool, which I think is the best version of the tool, is open source, so you can download it for free and play with it. Is there any questions for web app pen testing? Nikto, it's a Nikto. So it's a command line tool. I don't think you can get it on Windows, but definitely in Linux. And it scans both Windows and Linux servers for common misconfigurations, security misconfigurations. I think it tests for over, I'm not sure, but I know it's over like, at least over like 5,000 common vulnerabilities. It's a pretty handy tool. I've found some pretty like serious findings with it before. It seems to work really well against WordPress. I found a couple of vulnerabilities that were definitely kind of scary using Nikto. I'll put a link to actually the GitHub real quick. Is there any other questions?
I have a question. Can
Yeah.
you hear me?
Yes.
So I'm wondering, in the cloud environment, one of the articles I commonly see about cloud breaches has to do with misconfigurations of containers in the cloud. And I'm wondering if you do something with that. I'm not sure if that's your category or somebody else's.
Oh yeah, so Adam, he was speaking earlier. He actually focuses on containers, but at this moment, we don't do anything with containers. So I was actually at a event in Vegas, a Qualys convention, and Qualys is a pretty heavy hitter in the industry, and they're just now starting to kind of building some testing parameters around container security. So it's something that definitely I think we should all be interested in, but I don't think anybody on our team has yet explored those topics.
Thank
If
you.
there's
A style is a vulnerability assessment limited to finding 80% of vulnerabilities as well. And I would say, well, it depends. So if you're doing like authenticated versus authenticated, like authenticated versus unauthenticated. Sorry, I need some water here. So an unauthenticated scan, it's not going to find, I'm not even sure if it'll find 80% of the vulnerabilities, but if you have a authenticated scan to the machine you're scanning, you should find 100% of the vulnerabilities. And I'll just say it's only for web apps where you're guaranteed not to find all the vulnerabilities with scanners because of like the custom nature of how applications are coded. And so yeah, some things people should look out for, they're worried about. I would say any type of input. So you're gonna have to work with your dev team with this, but anytime you're requesting or anytime you're taking data from a user, and it might not even be like user like intended that the user manipulates this data, so it can just be headers and stuff. Anytime you're using any of that information for internal logic of your back end, you have to make sure that you are safely handling that information you're receiving from the browser. So the rule is never trust anything from the browser. Is there any other questions? I don't think I missed any in the chat. Something I forgot to talk about too. I can't believe I've had so many conversations about this last couple of days, but future services. So something that TechGuard is looking to get into, and we are definitely dipping our feet a little bit at the moment, is API security. Something I figured out, I've been studying this topic quite a lot the last month or so. It's really the wild, wild west with APIs. The same way with web apps, APIs are, some dev team implementing them. It's a custom solution. And given that just the nature of the industry, everything's about, can we get it to work? How fast can we get it to market? And security is really an afterthought for APIs at the moment. And there's been some notable data breaches recently due to flaws in API security. So yeah, if there's no more questions, we can go ahead and move on to the next slide, which I think is
Oh, I'm sorry, I have one more question.
Oh, of course,
So-
yeah.
So do you guys like scan the news for certain vulnerabilities that might have hit recently
Yeah,
and incorporate those into your searches?
we do. So Log4j is, I'm sure we're all dreading that term right now. But Log4j, we definitely tested for that, and we'll have a conversation. So if we're on an engagement with the client, say we're actively working with them, we're like, hey, this new vulnerability it happened. We'll talk to them about it. It's like we have a conversation, see if this vulnerability might exist in their infrastructure. Sometimes if the scan, so sometimes our scanner, so we use Qualys, sometimes they'll release updates to the scanning platform that will allow us to scan for those type of vulnerabilities. Or sometimes we might have to do a more manual approach where we go study how the hackers are exploiting that vulnerability, and we'll try to work that into our tests as well.
Yeah, Qualys is pretty good about incorporating newly released CVEs rather quickly into their Qualys vulnerability IDs, so that if we repeat that scan, especially for a recurring customer, if somebody reaches out, that it will pull in that newly released CVE as well.
Is there?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I'll pass the torch. So social engineering is a good time.
Hey, this is Shannon. So I'm Senior Manager of Cybersecurity and Compliance. So, and I'm also the team manager. So we're going to talk about social engineering a lot. So some pen tests come with social engineering and some will not. It really depends on what the client is wanting. But if we do it, the typical ones that we do is phishing. Great way for us to obtain creds. That's an easy way in. It does not take a whole bunch of skill to get someone to click on that fish. That's why security awareness training is so important. Voice phishing or vishing is a good way as well for us to call up. We target a user, do a little bit of research, plan our backstory. That's a little bit more personal. It's a little bit more intimidating for a new person doing their very first vish to make sure that they plan it out. And we're actually quite successful at the vishing piece as well, and always trying to get the user to do something that maybe they shouldn't do, and it allows us a way in. And then the most fun is actually the physical engagements, whether you call it human pen test or trying to get into an environment we're not supposed to be in. So in testing those physical security controls, and is there stuff laying out that we shouldn't be seeing? Are we able to get to sensitive areas? What all could we do? Can we get to the equipment? Can we get to the USB ports on equipment we shouldn't get to? Those sort of things. Like I said, it doesn't take a lot to be able to pull this off. It's very fun. I would like to pass it back to the team to talk about a few of our engagements that we have had that have been the most fun, or something that has worked. Nolan, I'm going to pick on you to talk about your W2 approach first.
Oh, cool. All right. So I've coined this as the crane method, or as this is my last name, but it's a method I've used to get W2s from small and medium-sized businesses. I'll kind of walk you through the attack here. So essentially, you want to call the help desk of a business during lunchtime. And actually, let me back up a little bit. You need to do some passive intelligence gathering to gather or to get a name of a previous employee that no longer works at the company. And then you're going to call the help desk at noon and act like you're, worried and distressed because you're being audited by the IRS for like whatever year the employee worked at the company. And then you ask the help desk to transfer you to HR. And before HR picks up the phone, you just hang up. You call the help desk back again and be like, hey, HR didn't pick up. I think they're at lunch or something. Can you please leave them this message? My name is so-and-so. I'm being audited for this tax year. Can you please send me that W-2 to this email address? And since like it's coming from an internal request, HR isn't really tend not to verify anybody's identity. They're just trusting their fellow employee because they're getting like a piece of paper with some notes on it, or they're getting a phone call from an employee. So they kind of assume that somebody else has vetted it. And on paper, it sounds like it works. And I've actually got to work in person too. Definitely excited to try that one again. So train your employees, never trust some guy calling on the phone.
Yeah, sometimes we also do like coordinated phishing attacks. One educational client, we did 5 attacks at the same time. We all picked different targets. One was an HR person. We were successful 5 out of 5 times in obtaining creds, getting them to log on to a website that was mocked up, telling them that we were testing something, please try it. They all logged in, got 5 creds in 5 minutes. So with those creds, we were able to glean a whole bunch of information. You can imagine with the HR persons, what we were able to get to, and that all gets fed back to the client, obviously obfuscated. But it's actually, it's startlingly easy to do. Matt, Nolan, and Adam, do you guys want to talk about any of the physical engagements?
Sure, I can talk about one of them. So another one of our educational clients, we had a physical, we do physical pen tests on quite a large location they have. We were able to roam around their location for about 2.5 hours while they knew we were on the location. So we went up about, I don't know, hour beforehand. Nolan had stuck a marker in one of the doors to keep it propped open. And whatnot. And at like 5 o'clock when those doors are supposed to lock, an alarm went off, and they knew we were there. And it took them about 2.5 hours to finally catch up to us, running around the location. And in that time, me and Nolan were able to check countless rooms, hop onto multiple Ethernet ports, and whatnot. And eventually, it came down to me and one of our former coworkers. We're in actually a computer lab just printing off some of the network information on the printers, and finally the security caught up to us. And when it's fun when security catches up to us is that we also get to try our chance at talking out of it and seeing how long we get to try to talk to security and see if we use our human skills to get our way out of those situations. And that time we did not. And in this situation, security did not know we were on campus. And like we've said multiple times, the most important piece of paper that we have is the rules of engagement. Because if we don't have that rules of engagement, it looks like we're performing some sketchy breaking and entering stuff. And sometimes the police can get called and those ones things. But if you have that ROE, it's a get out of jail free card and that fun stuff. And the beauty of that is, while me and my other coworker got caught, Nolan was still running around the campus doing his thing and having his fun. And they didn't know about Nolan still being on the campus. And it allowed for Nolan to do an extra 30 to 45 minutes of roaming around the campus, seeing what he could find and going off of there. And I don't know if Nolan has anything more to talk about on that engagement too.
I have an interesting story too. So I have to preface this that I'm terrible at lying. lying gives me like a lot of anxiety. You can always tell when I lie. So I had to be a quick learner for this job. This job requires you to lie, but in a good way. So yeah, so essentially I impersonated an IT person. So one of our coworkers, he actually made I guess you can say fake IDs. So he was very good at making identification cards that look very realistic. He made me an IT badge. It looked legit and everything. So I put that on. I, got my nerdy tech outfit on. By that I mean a polo and khakis. And I knocked on the financial office's door at the university, and they let me in. And I just explained very nervously, mind you, that I'm the IT person and that we have an alert on the computer and I need to check it out. And she said, yeah. And I actually sat down on the computer. I used the credentials that we gathered from our phishing campaign to log in. And I was getting ready to plug a USB drive in there that had some fake malware on it. But she did the right thing, and she called the IT department. It was like, hey, there's a weird guy who's kind of sweaty trying to plug a USB drive into my computer. And I was caught. So I had to sprint out of the building and do a whole escape thing. So
But those are situations where we want to be caught. We want you to notice that this is not right.
yeah, it's definitely the most enjoyable part of the job is doing those social engineering gigs.
All right, we're going to move on just a little bit to auditing, keeping an eye on the time here. If you can move the slide to auditing. Thanks. So I'm going to run through this kind of fast for the sake of time. So we do audit assessments and gap analysis. So there's a couple of reasons that you would do it. One, for compliance, because you have to. This would be like industry frameworks like PCI or HIPAA. You should be reviewing this every year. Or you could be doing it because maybe you are an EM in IT, right? And you want to know how your actual state of security is against your chosen framework, whether it be Nist, whether it be ISO. You need to be checking on those things. So there's a lot of benefits for having an outside company come in and do that. You can do it inside, but some choose to do it outside to get a completely new perspective and point of view, and maybe be told how to improve their program. Sometimes when you're too close to the program, you don't always see outside of the box, or you don't always see what they're seeing at other clients to say, here's a way you could do this with your tool set that you already have. And it can help to form that security strategy, your 1 year, your 3 year plans, and prioritize what you need to focus on first. So some of the common findings we find in doing audit assessments, we do it against Nist, CMMC, ISO, the European standard, CIS, and HIPAA, amongst others, right? So those are the main things that we do, but what I constantly find is that risk analysis is not always performed, or if it is, it's a very small scope. Nobody's ever actually looking at all of the threats that are actually out there, or they're not doing an organizational level. It's very narrow and focused, or if they do one, it's never managed well. Usually, I don't say never, it's almost always not managed well. They'll do the risk assessment, file it away. And not necessarily managing those risks and mitigating it. So if you're in a framework like HIPAA, if you don't mitigate your risk, a known risk, you don't do anything about it, and that risk turns into a breach, well, you can be fined for willful neglect. And that's also coming with Log4j. If you're in a critical infrastructure industry and you didn't do anything about Log4j and it results in some sort of breach, you're going to be fined. An FCC that came out a couple of weeks ago is reserving the right to go after you. So risk management is very important and not well done. Usually lack of resources. Small to medium-sized business, you've got one or two or a handful of IT people trying to do a lot. And cybersecurity is always changing. It's a lot to keep up with. So sometimes, some I's aren't dotted and T's aren't crossed because of that. Management is not always involved. I mean, the ideal situation, we all know it, the best security strategy is a top-down approach where you have support from the top being pushed all the way down versus the bottom of your security person trying to do your job and you don't have the right tools or resources or time. So we see that a lot. A lot of people outsource their IT, especially a small business will hire an MSP, but don't give them any guidance. So if you're a small business and you have to adhere to a compliance framework, and you hire outside of your company, you better explain those controls that you have to meet to the MSP. If you have policies and procedures, but you've never communicated those to your MSP, then don't expect that they've configured it accordingly. There's a lot of lack of communication going on to the MSP and from the MSP back on the state of security of what they're managing. See that all of the time. Logging and auditing, we're going to have Jordan talk about that. So I'm going to gloss over that real quick. We don't see that happening all the time. If they usually don't retain the logs long enough to ever support an incident response investigation, should it ever come to that. Access controls, I see a lot of overprivilege, and I see a lot of shared passwords for like admin accounts, right? So they don't even know who did what. So policies and procedures, golden rule, say what you do and do what you say. A lot of times people will buy a template, and I can always tell real quickly if you just bought a template for a policy, like a whole policy set, changed a few words, added your name to the top and said, good, we got a policy, but they're not communicated. Nobody knows them. Nobody's following them. That's going to get called on an audit that will cause you to fail official assessments like ISO and PCI if you're not doing what you say you're doing. Contingency, disaster, and IR plans, if they have them, they've probably not been reviewed or tested at all, or not very often or regularly. And Dean's going to talk about that. So we move on to the next slide, please. If you have any questions, just post them in the chat and I'll answer them. All right, and Jordan is new to our team, so he's a blue teamer moving over to the red team, but this is his specialty area, and I'm gonna let Jordan take it away.
Yep, so like Shannon said, I'm new. My name's Jordan. Most of my background is being like a security analyst. I have around 8 years of experience, 6 probably doing the analyst work, and I think a reason I kind of wanted to jump to the red team is I just got stagnant, and I kind of wanted to see this perspective of the red team. And I think it's a little more exciting instead of being the defender just to attack. So, but anyways, I just want to talk about a little bit about the functionality of the SIM. So I think one of the most important parts is, like Shannon said, is the log management part. So, and this will change organization to organization, but most of this stuff is based on like what framework or thing you're following. And I dealt a lot with SIP, which is related to the energy sector, critical infrastructure, and we had to maintain logs for around 90 days. And if you don't have the logs, like she was saying, there's no way to go back and say something happens. If you don't have that in place, there's no way to go back and look at all of this stuff. But moving on, event correlation and analytics is where you will let your SIM do most of the work for you. This is where it will just correlate the logs, and this is where you can look over things and mitigate potential threats that your SIM will do for you. And then the SIM also has like the built-in, the management, the alerts, and this is where you want to look at your predefined correlation rules and go through all of those and take action on all of these threats. And a lot of these SIMs have the case management built in, so you can collect and preserve the evidence and then build dashboards around specific things that you want and all of the learning there. And then compliance management and reporting. This is where you can look at your specific frameworks and gather all of this data and keep it in a place where you can have the compliance audits, and a lot of these SIMs have built-in add-ons to assist with reporting on all of these things. I'm most familiar with Splunk, which if you just go out there and look, they have a lot of different add-ons you can add in for things like this. And then lastly, I just want to go into a few best practices for SIM that I think that are really important. So the first one is just defining your scope. So this would be a meeting with all of the IT people in your organization. This is where you can go over use cases and define how the SIM best fits into your org here. And then next, you want to go through and fine tune all those correlation rules that come built into the SIM. So instead of just turning everything on all at once, you want to fine tune each rule and have it applied specifically to your organization, and then just go from there. And then you also want to ID all of your compliance requirements from the start. So the SIM is just configured specifically to audit and report on the things you want to see. And then you can better understand your risk posture based on these frameworks that your organization is working on at the time. And then moving on to catalog and classify assets. I think this is important too, because you want to separate, say, what your finance department would do from your IT department. And this would help with just seeing like different abuse. So like the finance department shouldn't have all the same access as, say, the IT department. So this will just help you spot out all this weird network activity and just if anyone's abusing that. And then moving on to tune regularly. This was also where I spent most of my time doing. This is just to drown out all the false positives. So you're not overwhelmed all of the time and you're not wasting time and resources with your analyst looking at things that could be easily gone over with your sysadmin and say, hey, does this look normal, or is any, and then just tune that kind of stuff out. And then lastly, implement a response plan. So you just need to have specific workflows for when you're seeing these alerts in your organization. And so your team can respond effectively and fast. So with that, if anyone has any questions, just let me know. If not, I will send it on to Dean, who's going to talk about plan management.
What percentage of customers that you work with would you say like their SIM looks like just a haystack before you get to it?
Oh, back when I did it, it was, yeah, you have to do a lot of work in finding, like most of my time was spent when, say I went to a new client, is finding out how, like all of the the processes that I have. So I spent like months and months just defining all of what their traffic would look like and working with admins and stuff like that. And a lot of the times the log management part was a huge problem. These admins didn't want to take the time to forward the logs to the SIM. So you have to pick your battles with those guys. And with the critical infrastructure, it can be a problem because all of this kind of stuff is new to those guys. They like this equipment, it was like for SCADA, right? It's like actually powering the power grid. And security was not a thought in that until very recently. So, I mean, just getting the logs is like, that was part of the battle. So as long as you get the logs, you can kind of start working with these guys and asking them what's normal and things like that.
Yeah, if any of you guys are running Azure out there, Azure Sentinel is a great tool for log aggregation and for developing alerts and taking automated action based off of those things that you've configured, everything that Jordan just talked about. And that kind of drives your incident management as well. So you can close it out. It's like a dashboard for everything. So if you haven't looked at Sentinel and you're running Azure, definitely take a look at it.
Shannon, you there?
Yep.
Sentinel 1 is the SIM. Yeah, Gary. It's called Sentinel. And is that your question? What's the SIM called?
So I was typing it, not saying it. So there you go.
Yeah, Sentinel. There you go. Yeah, it's called Sentinel. Any other questions? All right, I'll let Dean.
Hi, my name is Dean. I'm going to talk about disaster recovery and contingency planning. Today, we don't have a lot of time, so I'm not going to do anything in depth. We're just going to touch on some key points. Before I get started, give you a little bit of my background. I got a degree in programming. I've been in IT infrastructure for 20 plus years. I was a process owner of IT processes. I've been a number of other tasks, and I was able to move up into management. So I was in charge of our operations team, in charge of the data center, UPSs, and the diesel generator and other aspects of the system there. So as everyone is aware, a number of years ago, it used to be a luxury to have disaster recovery and have plans in place. And I know some industry had more than others, but with today's natural disasters and some of the, I guess, accidental deletions of data, inappropriate behavior by some employees, internal, external threats, we all know it's now a must-have disaster recovery plan in place. So what is disaster recovery? Disaster recovery is IT technology, basically, the way I think of it as. It could be networking, telecommunications, your server, anything to do with hardware that provides services to the company. Contingency planning, I refer to that as business continuity. For those that aren't familiar with business continuity, it covers people, processes, and technology. So IT disaster recovery actually falls underneath contingency planning. And the whole intent of contingency planning is make sure all pieces of the business are taken care of and all the interests of the business are taken care of. And that comes in many, many forms. You can click on the next slide, please. And one way it's addressed, first of all, there's many different frameworks out there. It doesn't matter which one you follow. There's some core things you need to put in place when it comes to that place. I like to think of it as you have your management where they have to give governance and guidance on what they're trying to accomplish. Like, are we going to have a second data center? Are we going to have some other arrangements? Are we going to, you know, how much downtime are we willing to accept? Is it 1 hour, 3 hours, 2 days for different processes? They also want, and that is also translated over to the backup policy, where they talk about a couple of terms there. For RTO is your recovery time objective, how much time you're willing to accept for downtime. RPO, recovery point objective, is how much data or information management is willing to accept to be lost if an unplanned event occurs. And so you take that information, then you also work in other key components, like one, they're responsible for identifying responsibilities, who's going to be held accountable for all aspects of the processes, people, and technologies. So once you have some of that identified and approved by management, you start putting in some of the executable pieces when it comes to the contingency planning or business continuity. And some of those aspects are the business impact analysis. Of those who aren't familiar with it, it's known as the BIA. And that can be very in-depth, very costly if you do an outsourcing, but you do an in-depth analysis of what's your critical processes, your critical people that you have, any manual processes, what's your critical systems, and you prioritize it along with a few other things. And the key thing there is you identify what's most valuable to the company. It might not just be financial. It might be some other system to keep the reputation of the company in place. But that's all identified, among other things, in the BIA environment. Everybody's familiar with the communication plan as an aspect. Pretty self-explanatory. You want to make sure there's a backup to the primary person in case something happens if they're unavailable during that outage. Then you also want a resumption plan. And this can take on many forms. Typically, I like to think of it as logistical. Like, are we getting a temporary location for facilities for employees, or is it going to be permanent? Do we have the key players like I mentioned in the other one? If Dean goes down, is Shannon available to back him up, or who's that critical path to keep that process up and running? Other key things is the responsible for the backup resources, notifications, making sure all the emergency operations are taking place. Those are some of the things that could be included in those plans. You can click on next. Another key aspect of contingency planning and business continuity is incident planning. Because everyone gets tickets from the help desk or a phone call saying something's going on, and eventually it could escalate into a disaster, when management calls a disaster. And when that happens, you got to then kick into all these plans automatically. And there's a number of things you need to do. One of the industry recommendation is you want to do a yearly incident response table exercise, or a way to communicate with key stakeholders. You can click the next slide. And you want to make sure that key stakeholders are involved. And I know some companies are now starting to do this more than once a year. And I know, Shannon, I don't know if you want to speak more to this, otherwise.
No, I see the IR tabletop slide is up. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into that. But you're right, Dean, it should be tested at least once a year, and you don't want to wait till an emergency to do it. I was actually auditing a company in Texas at the time where Texas had all of that snow and all those power outages. And I was talking to the physical security person. They're like, yes, everyone fought me, but I put red plugs on all of the critical equipment that we need to keep up and running to keep doors locked, things like that. And then it was the next week that hit. And it was like, wow, all of his planning really paid off. And I love to see that. Unfortunately, I usually see that they don't have one or they've never tested it, but it is important. So we're gonna move on to IR tabletop. So as I talked about, a lot of people have an IR plan, but it's not just a plan. You should also have a procedure. You should have playbooks. You should have tested this. Nobody wants to test their incident response in an emergency. Right? That's why you need to test it in a calm period. The best recommendations are to test it once a year. Sometimes what we see is, yeah, we tested our IR plan, but it was just the IT team. Well, that's not really an IR test. So we do lead IR tabletop services where we would come to you, work with a client, plan out what that scenario is, right? And we try to make it like believable or fit the client, right? So people don't fight the scenarios that we're presenting and the injections that we're presenting. So we've already read your plan. We know which plan is. We're testing to see if the plan is actually being followed. Sometimes people get into problem solving and they forget their plan. So it's always important though, and a lot of people miss that if you're going to test your IR plan, you have to involve everybody in the communication chain and all of the stakeholders. So public relations, legal, management. A lot of companies, when they experience an incident that could be a breach or reportable incident, they fall down because the communication, once they decide they have it, getting that information out to customers or reporting it, if you're for the government, you got 72 hours, right? They sometimes don't make that. If you hem-haw around, you're gonna not report it in a timely manner, and that's where fines come in, or a loss of contract if you're on the government side. So, but that's usually where the delay is going to take place. So it's important that when you test these tabletops, that you actually have all of the people at the table to talk through, oh, is this an incident? Is it an event? Is it a breach? Oh no, they usually forget to refer to their cybersecurity insurance policy and the mandates in there. If you don't follow your policy and notify your cyber insurers, you can have reduced coverage or no coverage at all. Very important. A lot of times people miss that. So that is a service that we provide. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over real quick to a look ahead and back to Adam to talk about cloud services real quick.
All right, so Kathy earlier asked a really good question that is something that we are hearing more and more of. So just kind of remind everyone, I hear a bunch of phone calls quite a bit throughout the day and a lot of different asks from clients. Kathy, don't feel like you're alone. We get questions regarding containers, S3 buckets, etc. for each environment all the time. So if you're not aware, or maybe you're part of these statistics, cloud is coming. COVID really jump-started it because a lot of clients had to, or clients and businesses had to move themselves from on-prem to virtual, so that way day-to-day workflows could get done. So something that we've really seen, and we like to draw attention to, especially with, and there are a bunch of different statistics, but Gartner reported that public spending for cloud services will increase by 21% in 2022. That's already on top of like a 45% increase that happened the year before. There's also a Thales there's a Thales report too that did an independent study on, I think it was like 1,500 different IT security professionals that talked throughout different landscapes, and they had reported, and this was back in 2021, that 41 to 50% of organizations have moved to hybrid cloud environments or are fully in the cloud with all their workloads in there. So TechGuard looked at that, and we decided, okay, in order to be valuable to future clients, to our current clients, anybody that might come to us, we need to expand our services. In doing so, we've broken out and created cloud scanning services, as well as we have penetration testing on the books to be rolled out as well too. This will be for all three of your major environments, being Google, GCP, AWS. Cloud assessment scanning is something that we are ready to do now. It's here. So if anybody has any, I know being all time sensitive, if anybody has any questions about this, not for any sales intensive purposes, but are just curious about, what type of cloud things you can do. Kathy mentioned misconfigurations, and I could go on and on and on about what the common findings are, how we can shore those up. We have things in place. There are things that you can do. There are scans that you can run. There are free tools that exist for these that, if you feel confident in your skills in command line interface, maybe. If not, we have a bunch of services that we've spun up that can go to this. So as far as tools go, Gary, what we predominantly will use in a situation like this will be Qualys. Qualys has cloud connectors that it makes that runs basically a virtual connection as it is between your cloud environment and ours. From there, we can scan the individual resources. Now, to give you an example, like for AWS, you could run any of the main resources. This would be like subnets, network ACLs, internet gateways, load balancers, instances themselves, your routing tables, S3 buckets. One of I think the most common findings that happened during COVID was, and this included blob storages for Azure, where threat actors were able to detect your public storage buckets or blobs or S3. So there are preventative measures. We have built some things up that we're really excited about. Like I said, I know it's time sensitive, so I'll hop over to the chat for anybody that has questions. And by all means, please reach out to us personally too. I believe our information should be somewhere that you can see it. If not, I'll drop it in the chat for you.
Okay, just a quick touch on things that we have learned. So one of the things that we've learned as a team is we have to do a lot more pen tests with a faster turnaround. Gone are the days where a person just takes a pen test and runs the beginning to the end all by themselves. You can do that, but it takes an experienced pen tester to be at that state. But a team approach, more eyes are better than one. Especially on a problem like this. Take everything you've analyzed, for example, in the discovery stages, and before you have your attack, sit down, plan it as a team. So what we have found that works better is an SME approach. So for Adam, it's cloud. For Noland, it's web scanning. For Dean, it's audits and planning. And for new people like that, we're bringing in like Jordan. So the first thing we're going to do is put them through some pen testing training. And with that team approach, where you are able to contribute on a pen test a lot faster. You don't have to learn everything at once. You learn it one piece at a time, and you can contribute a lot faster with that team approach, and it increases the turnaround as well. And one of the goals that we've set has been set for me by Evan, who's on the call, is a 20% learning target. And I really appreciate that we have dedicated time to learn and improve our skills. That's 1 out of every 5 days. And if you think about it, 2 hours a day, you should be actually keeping your eyes on the horizon of the cybersecurity landscape, what's new, what's coming, how to improve your skills, how to get better, and how to evolve with that landscape. So that's what it takes to stay ahead of things. And I really appreciate that we at least have that time to learn on our job. And we also are looking to grow our internship program. So we actually got Matt and Nolan through our internship program as well. I'm happy to have them on the team. And so with that being said, guys, I'd like to turn over to you. Can you just kind of go like, what is it like a day in the dojo working on the job with all of us in the office? Does anybody want to expound upon what that climate is like?
I can start. So, first thing I gotta say, it's definitely a really close knit and fun crew here. We have a lot of fun, and we do some pretty cool work too. So it's pretty exciting that every day we get to come in here with the mindset as like, how can I break this? So that's definitely pretty cool. And also like the overall culture of like learning and trying to better ourselves is definitely really appreciated. So we're actually encouraged to spend our work time to study and to achieve certifications and to watch videos and just learn stuff. And I've never worked anywhere else like that.
Thanks, Dylan.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to overspeak, but a day in the dojo is also something that is never the same. I have been here. So my first day at TechGuard was actually at the very beginning of the pandemic. Like I literally got onboarded, walked in, met all the guys, like I think I set up my monitor and then HR came in and said, you know, hey, we're going to be shutting down. And I think since then, I have never had the same day here. Like I never get a feeling of Groundhog Day. I never have had a feeling of like Jordan had described before, kind of being like stuck in a rut where you don't really feel like you're going forward. If anything, you know, imposter syndrome, which is something that runs quite rampant through this. I didn't really understand what it was till I started joining this, but I say that in a very positive way because the challenge that, you know, our team puts on ourselves to be great and the atmosphere that we work in it's awesome. It's infectious to be around such motivated people that are all trying to be the best that they can at their crafts, looking at ways to, you know, optimize how TechGuard can be the best in the area of the field that we're specializing in. So I couldn't say enough good things about what it's like working in the dojo. It's awesome. It's great to be surrounded by such motivated people and people who really care about the stuff that we do. And the product that we're bringing largely to all of you and getting to speak about tonight.
Yeah, I think for somebody looking to get into red team testing, because we do a wide variety of things, it gives you exposure to all of those things versus maybe if you worked on an IT team at a larger company, you kind of get pigeonholed into a swim lane where maybe your job is to just run vulnerability scans, or maybe your job is on the SOC, or maybe you're, managing jobs in the operations center. So you kind of get stuck in a swim lane, and at a company like this, you really get your hands on a lot of different things and can move around and learn the skills at your own pace. I actually love coming to the office. I think COVID is hard for a lot of us because we don't get that face-to-face with each other in person and don't get those the jokes and the fun that you normally have. I feel like I cackle. I have a cackle laugh. I think I do that all day long. I'm sure it's annoying, but I love to have a work environment where laughing and joking is just allowed and embraced. So I really don't like working from home, but we survive. I mean, we use Teams a lot. We can definitely do it, but I actually kind of think as the team is like my work family. So that's what's really important when we hire people. We hire for the fit, the personality, as well as the skills. All right, and unless if there's any questions, if anybody wants to just ask a question on the call, I think that's the end of it. Sorry we went over. Thank you for all your questions in the chat.
Thanks for all the great information. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Everybody
everyone.
stay safe with the snow too. It's supposed to be crazy out there. So I don't know about you, but I'm gonna find an empty parking lot and do donuts. But
That sounds like a plan, Nolan. Thank you, everyone who joined us tonight and everyone who was very engaged in the chat. That's awesome. And yeah, thank you to our awesome team for speaking. And have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.